in a distribution or a manufacturing company, where you giving people professional development opportunities that might not be directly related to their jobs, but may give them some opportunities for advancement in the future. So that could mean getting their GED, getting a college degree, getting additional writing skills classes, maybe learning photography so they can get into become more involved in marketing. So sometimes you have to be creative about finding some ways to provide that for people. So that's the second strategy. The third strategy is autonomy, and all those exclamation marks and question marks is just to represent the fact that we often feel really, really nervous about this strategy. We usually think, when we think autonomy, we think like everyone's just going to be doing their own thing, and there's going to be absolute chaos and nothing's going to get done. People aren't going to come out to work on time. We're going to lose our customers, whatever that's where we tend to go when we think about autonomy. So what I like to suggest is a specific definition of autonomy. And this comes from a really excellent book called Engagement Magic. And it's this idea that autonomy in the context of a company is actually giving people boundaries and giving people freedom and also holding people accountable. So it's this idea that give people as much autonomy as possible, but you're actually putting some boundaries around it. So it could mean giving a department or a team the freedom to be able to buy whatever equipment they need, implement whatever software they want, redesign their space however they want. But it has to stay within a certain budget, and it has to be accountable. And maybe an accountability might mean this is the very best product for their needs. It may mean that they're presenting a very best, if it's a space that customers walk through, that it's presented in a way that is welcoming to customers. So really being clear about when you give people freedom, what the boundaries around that are. And sometimes that can also be done through, sorry, I actually was just going to say sometimes that share just a couple other examples. So one example was from a company that actually hired all these people thinking they were going to have all these evening shifts for kind of doing working with some of their customers. And then when they hired all these people on, they suddenly found out that the evening shift, that the customers actually didn't want evening service, right? They wanted service during the day. And so the company really struggled. Initially, they're like, okay, we just going to have to tell these people to work during the day. But instead, they really engaged the team and sort of said, okay, like, here's the situation and how would you like to figure this out? And they actually came up with a pretty creative solution. I think people were able to kind of work in different shifts. There are some people who I think did step out, but a lot of people were able to find a way to make it work. So this is just a wonderful way to tap into some of the knowledge in your company and hear some of people's perspectives and opinions and be able to design something better. So that's the third strategy. And I do remember what was the other thing I was going to say. So this is also a strategy where financial education and information can really help. It's hard sometimes for people to be accountable because they don't always understand how the company works financially and what they actually need to do to help the company and be able to make good judgment calls. And so taking some time to do financial education can really help folks, keeping people updated on how the company is doing. And just to give a fun example, a printing company was trying to get its employees to think about saving costs and didn't want them sort of over-focused on the wrong thing, like pens in the office or donuts for breakfast or things like that. They really wanted people to focus on saving ink. And so they actually came up with a really simple solution. They had a workforce where not everyone spoke English, but they came up with this fantastic visual where they showed a gallon of water, a gallon of milk, and then a gallon of ink with the prices underneath it. And it was just a wonderful, simple way to help employees really think about and prioritize where to spend some of their energy in thinking about cost-saving ideas. So that's the third strategy. The fourth strategy is community. Trying to get my slide to advance. This is really important to foster a sense of connection. Someone is not going to act like an owner if they feel anonymous at the company. if they feel like nobody knows them or cares about them, if they feel like they're just a number that can be replaced. So it's really important to get employee owners connected in a lot of different ways, right? So some of it is like having good relationship with their supervisor, having good relationship with their peers. That can really help. And then as much as possible, also connecting them with people in other parts of the company, right? Across department, across location. That has both been easier and harder with COVID, depending on what your company is like. But really trying to find some creative ways to connect people. So that has happened. I think there have been some companies that have engaged in some creative games across locations via Zoom. I always think getting people to work across department or across location on different task forces and committee can be really helpful. I think oftentimes we can really get to know people when we get chances to work together. Um, and um, uh, and so those are all some really good opportunities to build some connections in the company beyond just the usual social hours or virtual happy hours or whatever people are able to do these days with the COVID restrictions in place. And the other thing in all of this, and not just in this strategy, it's true in all of them, but I think it's especially important in this one, is to attend to diversity, equity, and inclusion, to make sure that everyone in the company feels a sense of community and connection, not just some people, right? So that everyone feels like they belong. People don't feel like they have to hide parts of themselves in order to show up and feel like they belong at the company. So that's a kind of an added facet to community to be thinking about. And I know that many companies have really been thinking very seriously about how to be improving diversity, equity, and inclusion in their companies. Yvette, I just see a question about how do you all connect virtually? So I guess, was that a question for the audience?
People wanted to share different ways that they're connecting, or if they're having difficulties, I guess, connecting over, Zoom, or it's hard to kind of find out, what did people do on the weekend, or, is there enough time spent for that?
Yeah, it's certainly harder. And we're also hearing from manufacturing and distribution clients that it's also tougher because of COVID, because people can't do as many events where people connect. You have to keep people in smaller groups to keep more distance. So, and then also a lot of times people are still wearing masks when they interact, and that can make it a little bit more difficult. So the last strategy, and I guess we can maybe come back to the connecting virtually question, both if audience members listening in have ideas to share, or we think we can also come back to it a little bit at the end. But I just want to touch upon the final strategy, which is getting people connected to impact and purpose, helping people feel like their actions matter. And I think that can happen through a couple of ways. One is that I actually want to start with the one that showed up last, which is the personal meaning, right? So a lot of times there's something in a job that matters for us individually. Maybe somebody gets to do a lot of teaching in their job and they really enjoy that. Maybe they feel a lot of satisfaction around creating a quality product, whatever that might be. People like to have an engineering challenge. So there might be personal meaning that people have. And there's also often a company purpose to connect people to. And in many cases, that's both about creating wealth for employee owners, but it's also often about providing a service, a product, something that makes people's lives better in the world. And so trying to get people to see the broader contribution that the company is making can really help people feel more committed to the company, more like an owner, because what they're doing is something that's going to help others. And then the other piece, which I think is the one that often gets overlooked, is that in our workplaces, we also want to be able to see the immediate impact of our work. And what I mean by that is that every day when we show up to work, our actions affect other people in the company or affect our clients. And it helps to be able to see that and recognize that. So that could be something as simple as when you get your invoices on time, right? Accounting is happy because they're not stressed, because they can get invoices out to the customer. They can manage the cash flow for the company. And that is meaningful both for the company management, but also for the accounting team. It could mean that really annoying task of having to enter all the data Um, even though it's not the most exciting thing to do, it actually has a really valuable input, right? It maybe helps your supervisor, helps your department get the right data to be able to make decisions about the department strategy, about near-term choices the department has to make. So helping people see that connection. I also always like to share the story of my colleague Betty, who she is our office manager at Praxis, and I remember interviewing her and really asking her about her motivation. So Betty gets to do a lot of the administrative behind the scenes work, the work that is not glamorous, to help our firm run. And she always says, when I do the behind the scenes work, the work that's, not the most exciting, it's administrative. But when I know that somebody, a consultant or somebody that I'm supporting, is now able to be with a client, be at a conference, and not have to worry about any of this, I really feel good. I feel really satisfied. So this idea that people can feel satisfied if their actions make someone else's life a little bit better or gives people a little less worry. So making sure people can get connected to that. So in a company, what that might look like, connecting people with the company purpose. I think there have been lots of creative ways that people have done that. Everything from posting customer letters, from showing some of the products or projects that your company has taken on. And then immediate impact, there have been some really creative ways to do it. I mean, some of it is just fostering a culture of appreciation where people can really are often going back to folks to give positive feedback, to be able to talk to them about how something they've done has helped them. Or there have been other ways that companies have found kind of creative peer award types ideas. So that could mean, I think one company, Dansko, has these certificates of awesomeness. So it's this idea that, anybody can nominate an employee for a certificate of awesomeness, which is a gift card. And the idea is it's just a way to be able to recognize somebody that has really helped you out, really done something awesome for you. So it helps cultivate some of that culture of appreciation. So these are the 5 strategies. So just as a recap, taking care of the basics really matters. Money and working conditions, safety, quality supervision. Challenges, opportunities for growth, learning, and challenge. Giving people autonomy. So autonomy is freedom plus boundaries and accountability. So we have a specific definition around that. Building community with attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And connecting people with a greater purpose and impact. So those are the 5. And I guess as we're transitioning over to Elisa, you can feel free to take a moment to answer the polls. They're both asking you what you do well in these areas and where you could maybe improve, as well as your own assessment of the ownership culture. So feel free to take a moment to do that. And I'm just looking through the chat right now. There's some good ideas in there about virtual connecting. So a 1-hour meeting every 2 weeks, which is half dedicated to one of the team members educating the group on something and half dedicated to something we all share that is personal to us. What I love about that is that actually has some structure to it. I think sometimes when we're just asking people to show up to a virtual Zoom happy hour, it can be tough to know what to talk about, or the same people always talk. So I actually really love that there's a little bit of structure to get people connected, because sometimes we need that in the virtual world. And then another great comment about staff shoutouts during all staff meetings once a month. That's a really simple and easy way to recognize and appreciate people. So I think some poll results are coming in. So on the scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your company's degree of ownership culture? So most of you put yourselves around 2 or 3. Few people are excited, but want to get more people invested in some of places of our company, but not everywhere. So yes, it's certainly a journey. And I'm glad to hear that in most of these cases, you at least have some people who are engaged, right? That's often a really good starting point. And then for those of you who mentioned maybe people are disengaged, you're not sure, sometimes even starting to ask and learn what's going on, doing a survey, doing some focus groups can actually help you understand why people are disengaged, and actually might give you some ideas on how to get started. And oftentimes it means implementing some of these strategies. So which of these strategies did you practice well at your company? So I guess, I forgot. So to get to the results, I guess you click polls on the right-hand bar. And so looks like a range, taking care of the basics, growth, learning, autonomy, and then a couple less for community and connecting people with purpose and impact. And then finally, which ones do you want to strengthen? So it's almost the reverse of before, right? Most of you are pretty good at the basics, but really thinking about connecting people more with purpose and impact, and some of the other items as well. So thanks for your thoughts on this. And I encourage, especially as you have continued to have good ideas to share, to feel free to put them into the chat box. I see some other good ones about virtual games like Jeopardy, Bingo, and company trivia coming up as an option to connect people virtually. So I've done enough talking. I'm going to pass it over to Elisa to talk about the ESA experience.
Hi again. Just want to, invite folks to also provide their experience in their company. I'm here to share a little bit about what ESA does and how we foster our employee owner culture, and hear from others, as I want to take some new ideas back to the house and share that with the teams that I work with. So we certainly are not doing things 100% right, but we've been at it a while and maybe have some good things to share. Just going over a little bit about ESA, Environmental Science Associates. We are 100% employee owned, as I mentioned, and we are an environmental consulting firm. Our tagline is we deliver work that matters. We're planners, environmental scientists, and restoration scientists and designers. We work on projects for communities, infrastructure projects, open spaces, and wildlands, and ESA has been around for more than 50 years now. We have about 500 or so employees and 21 offices across California, the Pacific Northwest, and the Southeast. About our ESOP, the company decided to start, ESA instituted an employee stock ownership program back in 1994. And by 2000 became 100% employee owned. I came on board in 1997, so have been part of the ESOP journey and our evolution into a mature ESOP myself, experiencing that. And really what we believe is that being an ESOP means that every employee owner has a stake in the company, and the things that we do, everyone influences our company value, as a monetary value, as well as just an experience. Can be both positive and negative, and then we all have a role and responsibility for ensuring the health of our company. So we can go ahead to the next slide, please. Overall, what we believe is that a high performing culture is really about the people that we have here. It's all about the connections we make with one another and the work we do, and through the work we do. And for ESA, while the product that we sell to our clients is really the intellectual abilities and skills of our staff, really our relationships with each other as well as with our clients and team partners is really our greatest currency. And so to achieve that, the things that we strive to and embrace are, energy. We all understand that energy is infectious. If employee owners are excited and engaged in the work that they do, that excitement creates great outcomes and drives others to want to do the same. We believe that clarity is really important. People need to understand what it means to succeed and what they need to do to succeed. We also need to make sure that there's a clear expectation of what we need from one another and what we will commit to giving to each other. It's important to identify strengths. We all have unique strengths and skills, and really honing in and understanding what somebody's greatest skills is, and fostering that is where we can really unlock their individual potential rather than expecting them to do exactly one thing. And when we foster that individuality, we're really able to unlock folks' potential to do their very best to improve our company as a whole. Inclusion is really important. We touched on that just a bit ago, and we really want to think about ways that individuals can add value to our teams and act on their interests and their backgrounds to be able to create more diversity of thought and greater vision and in where we can be taking our companies as a whole. And then finally, momentum is everyone wants to be on a great team and be on a successful team. So when we do great work, it leads to more great work, and then everybody just kind of feels good about what it is they're doing. And it's really important to help foster that, but also to recognize it and share our successes so that people want to keep doing more of what we're doing. Next slide. And so that's kind of like our philosophy, but really specifically what we do at ESA, and I'll share a number of ways we strive to achieve those goals. And this is by no means an extensive and complete list, and one that I'd like to grow with the help of everyone here today. In terms of our employee culture, in addition to the role of the trustees and management for supporting and fostering this culture, we have an ESOP ownership committee, and they're really critical to helping drive our culture. We have, I mentioned, about 20 or so offices, and we have an ownership committee member that is from each office, which is less important right now that we're mostly working remotely, but it allows somebody to have a contact with an individual that can help explain what the ESOP means, explain what the value of an ESOP is, and each individual's participation in that, both from a program standpoint as well as this understanding and sense that you're part of the team and you're driving our company values and values overall. And that team is really critical to our into our overall ESOP. We provide regular education throughout the course of the year, and that's really, everything ranging from ESOP 101s that we do twice annually, where there's a sharing of our overall ESOP schedule and the vesting schedule and every bit of information that a new entrant would need to understand about the ESOP as a whole, as well as our individual roles within it, both from what we receive as a retirement benefit, essentially, but also how we contribute to driving the financial value as well as the overall goals of the company, our company. We have an internal web page that includes all of the information that folks need regarding the ESOP and the things that our team goes over twice a year. Both our ownership committee and our trustees have a specific email address that goes to the whole of that core. They are separate, so that should employees have questions or not be comfortable talking about a certain topic in a public forum or meeting, they can come to either of those groups for support or answers to any questions they may have. We have town halls throughout the course of the year, which are company-wide. We've been doing this since before COVID, so we've always had kind of a virtual component to the way we do our company-wide meetings, so that everyone can be at the same meeting at the same time and be hearing the same messages from our leadership. And those tend to be at least twice a year, and we cover everything from financial health, economic goals, as well as the pursuits and the things that we want to be achieving in the future as a company around the work we do. And we also have annual ESOP valuation and stock price presentations. We try to make it fun by having stock price contests that folks can enter prior to this valuation meeting. And then we have financial literacy trainings and DEI trainings that help support the incorporation of diverse values and viewpoints into the work we do. And then we really try to share the value of the ESOP beyond the monetary and retirement benefits, and really, especially for younger participants or newer participants that don't have as much time investing in our program, understand how their participation as employee owners really does affect the work we do and what work we want to do. we incorporate our ownership goals into the strategic plan, and by doing so, I will say that our number one goal is that we remain 100% ESOP, but we also incorporate monetary financial goals into our plans that are intended to drive our ESOP value, but also drive the work we do to remain successful, and the quality of the work that we do. And these go into our 5-year plan, as well as our annual plans that always engage our employee owners into that process. We feel it's really important to celebrate success. That was mentioned earlier too. That means both celebrating our new entrants to the ESOP plan, but also recognizing our employee owners' long-term commitments to the work we do through our bonusing programs and other incentives, but also public recognition of our project achievements through our various meetings, but our external website as well, and our social media, celebrating our projects that we do for our clients, but also a lot of our internal initiatives that engage all of ESA. I'll also mention that our HR program incorporates the growth of our employee owners, not just from setting goals that relate to financial drivers, but what it's going to take for them to elevate their career in a path that will be most interesting for them and provide the most success for them individually, as well as the overall company health. And we strive to be as transparent as possible about the business that we do, and that runs from, as I mentioned, these annual ESOP valuation and biannual town halls where we discuss the financial health of our company and our longer term financial goals, as well as our monthly financial and contract acquisition reporting, and weekly utilization reporting. All of that information is available to all employees here at ESA. So really, we just want to foster a place that everybody is seeing this as one company, that we are acting as owners by being responsible and having a growth mindset together, as one collective. And I think that's all I had to go over quickly. Virtual games, I love that idea. That's something that we do at ESA as well. That's a lot of, I think that's fun the one thing that I thought of as when I saw that is we have, during our ownership month, that's always a game playing type of space and competitions amongst all of our offices and regions about the work we do and what we know of the ESOP. So that's a great example.
So we've covered, I guess, the formal presentation part of our session. So we want to invite either questions or ideas from folks. So either maybe questions first, either about anything that Elisa or I said. Feel free to put them in the chat box, or if you're feeling brave, you can. Yvette, you might have to walk through the technical parts. I think you can actually pop up and join us.
Yes, if people are feeling brave, they can raise their hand and I can put them on the stage. Okay. They would have to take themselves off mute and okay. Themselves to the camera. But, that's kind of the fun part about it, right? Is being able to have these experts here to answer all the questions. Elisa's, she's been doing it for a long time. So, okay, Kelly has one. Any tips on getting skeptics on board? And I think that this is a great question that we get all the time. Some really good answers. Kelly, do you want to get on stage, or do you want them to just answer the question? If you do, just raise your hand. I'll add you to the stage.
So Lisa, do you want to take a stab at that?
First, well, I was hoping for a little bit more background, and maybe you can say so in the chat if you want to get on stage. It's like the type of, I'm trying to guess what types of skeptics you have, and I think that in my experience, there's been skepticism around, well, gee, you know, how is the distribution work, and how do we know that it's not just a bunch of executives at the top of the company that own all the stock? And so that's where transparency comes in. I know it's talking about transparency around financials, but there's transparency that is available that relates to how the ESOP distributions work, that you could share to make it clear that it is a fair and equitable division of profits. And the other skepticism is around, you know, that I've experienced is more around folks that are newer to the company or newer in their career, and they're not really seeing, when you talk about value in an ESOP, that if we focus on the financial value, then the skepticism comes from those that are earlier in their career or newer to your company that haven't had time to vest and create that bank account, essentially, that shows more tangibly what the value is. So that is where I think that it's building on what it means to be part of an ESOP and how your contributions really matter, is where the rubber meets the road, and making sure that when folks are communicating what their interests are or what they feel they need, that they're being answered and that their suggestions are being incorporated into your plans. And you know, not everyone will be taken into your plans, but that you know, creating ways to show that the contributions and the ideas of individuals really do matter and are affecting your business is where I see some of the skepticism starting to go away when people are really feeling like they're engaged.
Yeah, I'd say ditto to everything. And then I'd say the one other thing I'd add is that sometimes people's skepticism isn't really about the ESOP, but it's actually about kind of mistrust of leadership or mistrust of the company. And so sometimes there's something deeper underneath that. A lot of the education and transparency can help, but sometimes there are some other things that companies can address that aren't directly ESOP related, but will actually help people feel trusting of the ESOP. So there's another question for you, Elisa. Working for a professional services firm, do you have tips on how to respect billable time? But, oh, okay, sorry, it just scrolled up. But getting technical team members on board and engaged.
That question again. It moved so I can see the whole of it.
I had to scroll up a little bit.
And there you go. Yeah, I mean, keeps moving. Being a consulting firm, we really are, what we're collecting on essentially is our billable time. And I gotta see the question again. I'm losing the context here. Sorry about that.
That put it back down at the bottom. So hopefully.
Oh, thank you. But getting technical team members on board and engaged. The one thing that I will start with, and there's tons of ideas that we could all share, is that to respect our billable goals while also, you know, undertaking our growth goals for ourselves and making people understand what their responsibility is really creating a team atmosphere, a one company atmosphere, as I was mentioning earlier, is if you approach somebody with like, your utilization goal is X and you just need to hit it, you need to achieve it, then there's not really an understanding of why and what that means to that person. So creating an understanding of how that dollar that the person is billing filters through our entire financial cycle and then comes back to us as employees through our ESOP as well as our bonusing program is helpful. But there's, I think, also this sense of community that we've been talking about that needs to be fostered. So people understand that when you don't meet your goals, that it's not just that, oh, you didn't meet your goals and you're going to be docked or you're not going to get the best bonus individually, but the effects that it has on others within the team. If you don't meet your goal, then that means that somebody else had to do more work to get the job done. If you don't meet your goal, then somebody else had to work on the weekend if you don't meet your goal, then our overall pot of bonus money and stock availability is reduced. And that not just affects you personally, but the person that you sit next to and the person that you work with every day. And so I think that's one thing that is helpful to start to understand, is that we're not, we're not independent units within a company. We're all in this together and supporting one another. And then I think it's also really important that folks have an active understanding of what a billability or utilization goal is fostered in, and that managers are taking into consideration what somebody's individual skills are, and whether that utilization goal really makes sense for an individual. And I think that we can start with like, if you've been, in an industry for 5 years and you have this much experience, this is about what you would be doing, and this is about the goal you should have. But kind of going back to some things that we've mentioned earlier, recognizing individuals' skills and what their goals could be and what they would bring. Sometimes you might have a conversation with somebody, and the utilization goal that you set may not quite be right and capitalize on their best skills and attributes.
Thanks. So we have a big question from Joe. Just how do your companies create greater autonomy? How do your managers embrace their fellow employees' involvement in autonomy? Do you want to take that, or do you want me to give a start to that one?
I'd love you to take a start from that, as I really like, the three parts of what autonomy can mean. It's a great framework.
Yeah. So Joe, I would say probably two things: structure and skills. So for companies to really create autonomy, a lot of it has to happen through managers and supervisors being able to cultivate the skill of empowering their teams, being able to delegate well. So this is where a lot of good leadership and supervision skills come to play. So really helping give leaders the right skills to delegate authority whenever they can, with boundaries. And then creating structures can also really help. So, I think I mentioned earlier, having like continuous improvement teams or committees that are working on different initiatives that are important to the company are a great way to give a group of people some autonomy with boundaries, right? You want people to work on something specific. They have a specific budget. They're working towards a particular goal. And I think along with that, being really clear about what like authority they have, right? Do they need to get approval from management at the end of the day? Can they actually go ahead and implement something? Or sometimes employees are just consulted, right? So maybe it's a form of giving some autonomy when if a manager is about to make a decision, rather than just go make it, to actually talk to his or her team, get some input on it, and then make the decision. And then there's other like processes, I think, that can be put into place to also foster autonomy. So I guess autonomy and input, I think I would put involvement. So for instance, strategic planning or annual planning gives lots of chances to talk to employees to see what they're experiencing, what they're seeing, and giving input into some of what the company might work on, what the direction of the company might be.
That hit on most of what I would have said, and I'll just maybe add a little bit in your last point about inclusion of thought in the annual planning cycle. And that's something I really, really feel strongly about. In the team that I manage, everyone is included and invited to participate in a workshop, to participate in creating our plan for the year. And it doesn't mean that everyone's idea rises to the top and is going to be the highest priority, but it all goes into the plan, and it's part of our thought process. And this, includes a range of folks that are from zero. We have interns, and we invite our interns into this meeting, as well as our first year employees on up through folks that have been with ESA more than 20 years, like myself, or folks that have been in our industry for 30 or more years. And it really takes that inclusion of everyone to get the best ideas. And I think that is part of this first step of people feeling like, they have some autonomy to contribute. And I fully support it. Repeat everything that I wouldn't repeat everything, because I believe everything that Lynn said is perfect. I thought of one thing that we're striving for is, you mentioned the supervisory training and that being a really important part of establishing this sense of autonomy. One thing that we're starting to recognize is that our employees need to understand what supervisors are supposed to be doing for their employees. So, I think that we've primarily been focusing at ESA on supervisor training so that our supervisors are better able to support the employees that they manage, and help them establish career growth patterns and goals that will help them further their advancement. But, I think I've just kind of recently recognized, like, well, our employees need to know what their supervisors are supposed to be doing for them, and hold them accountable too, to making sure that they are giving them the support that is expected. That was something that is just another addition.
Really interesting. And we have one more question from Christy, which is, we are hoping to implement the employee-owned business next year, or maybe the year after. Any tips for HR on how to talk about this with employees? Not great at financials. So let's speak to it. I also think, since a lot of people on this call have announced ESOP to their employees, love people to share any tips or lessons in the chat box too, while we speak to it. So Elisa, do you want me to start, or do you want to start?
I'll go really quickly. As I'm reading this and guessing that my suggestion is that HR shouldn't necessarily be the one having to talk about financials and the whole of what an ESOP means to our our employees. I would maybe suggest creating a team of folks that are representing, addressing this, and having somebody from your financial division being part of that, and so that piece can be somebody else's responsibility, and you can focus more on the true human resources element of creating an ESOP.
Yeah. So I was going to just add, I think the NCEO has some good publications with some tips on it. I think there's an NCEO ESOP communication source book. But I think to do a different angle, I think implementing and talking about employees, think about it as a journey, not a one-time thing. I think you heard some good examples from ESA about kind of ongoing ways to keep it in the foreground. But I think for the actual announcement and sort of the initial follow-up education, have fun with it. So it's a big milestone. It's really like, I want to say congratulations, even though it's in the distance, right? So a lot of times company leadership will, kind of share the story of why they did it, share some basic information. A lot of times there'll be follow-up sessions to talk about the details. But I think a lot of times the financial stuff actually comes slowly over time. And I don't know how much financial information your company shares now. Some people go into the ESOP having shared a lot of it already. And, so there's not, they kind of keep doing it. And some companies, like, they may have been like never shared any financial information before. And so they need to take some baby steps, right? It's hard. They may start, maybe even sharing revenue might be a really big deal. So sometimes see it as a journey and like think about what's the next step or what's the next piece that you want to share with people. And I think especially with financials, if you haven't shared it before, it's really important to share it with education. So really help, not just like throwing up the income statement, but really like helping people understand the different pieces of it.
That's where ESA early on, I recall, and we still have them. We had financial literacy, trainings on their own, and definitions. Most of us here at ESA do not come from a finances background, so it is difficult to understand at first. And having a terminology sheet and definitions and training that really would walk us through what these financial terms all mean and what our finances are. That was really helpful, I found, and it's something that we continue to do for new employees all the time.
Mm-hmm. It's a good example in the chat about a Q&A session where people submitted questions to the management team. So that was a great suggestion. And then another question from Joe about top tips or silver bullets for 4 and 5. So that was community and the kind of impact purpose. Gosh, I feel like silver bullet, that feels like a lot of pressure. I would say there probably isn't a silver bullet. I guess I go back to the journey idea. It's an ongoing process that all companies pay attention to. If you're doing a lot of it already, you think about what are one or two things to enhance it, build it, strengthen it. And if you haven't done a lot of it at your company before, it's thinking about maybe there's a couple things to get started in. Or sometimes it's really thinking about, depending on where leadership is, getting leadership committed to it so that they can act in ways that support that, right? Really encourage their teams to build community, be connected, connect people with purpose. Or sometimes companies will create communications committees or other committees and charge some employees to be able to help with some of this work. And actually the NCO also has a great book on committees. So Yvette's been putting them in. So that's also a great thing to think about for empowering some employees to be working on number 4 and 5. Yeah. Other questions? Or Lisa, is there anything you want to add?
Questions and great suggestions. I'm making note of a few things now and want to carry that into our work as well.
Yeah, thank you all for your good questions and for some of the really good suggestions in the chat box. Well, thanks everyone for joining our session. I guess we'll stay on if there's any lingering folks that have questions. I think I can turn off the recording. So if people want to stay and ask any questions after this, you can feel free. Otherwise, enjoy your weekend.